The American dream means different things for different people. And don't worry, I'm not about to go off on a political rant here. What I heard most growing up was that the American dream meant having a house, a wife, kids, and a stable paycheck. But I grew up around entrepreneurs, people making a living, doing things all by themselves, and getting by however they could, which means sometimes it was steady and other times it was not so great. For me, my dream was always to do something I love every single day. I've always seen it as you have one life, so I better do my best, work my hardest to try to live in a way that I want to live. So my dream became this to curate art, to share it, to make it. And that's what I'm working toward every single day. My wife's family were immigrants to America. Their dream was to give their kids the life they never had. That was their American dream. My wife was lucky enough to grow up here and took every opportunity she could to make the most of being an American. She became a nurse and now helps children every day in the hospital. She takes so much pride in what she does and is the hardest working person I know. And now, hopefully, she'll be able to give our future kids the childhood she never had, and they'll have their own American dream. This is the My Art is Real podcast, a narrative journey into the lives that shape art. Today's episode, Gigi Chen, right after the break. The My Art is Real podcast is a fully independent endeavor. If you enjoy the show, consider collecting one of my limited edition prints on myartisreal.com. Each one is made with love here in the studio and in collaboration with previous guests and friends. You can also show that support on Patreon. By signing up, you will get never before heard bonus clips, access to physical zines and stickers delivered right to your mailbox, and discounts on prints, and so much more. Thank you for your support. Now back to the episode.
Hi, I'm Gigi Chen. I'm living in New York City and I'm a painter.
Gigi is a New Yorker through and through, right to the freaking core.
I grew up in New York City my whole life. I was first in Woodhaven, Queens, way out in Queens, New York City. And I've been living in Manhattan now for almost 20 years.
But she wasn't born in America. Gigi was born in China to two incredibly hardworking parents who wanted nothing but the best for their children.
I was born in Guangdong, China. My family and I came here when I was 8 months old. I don't have any memory of China, but I do. I can tell you something very interesting about my time there, if you guys are interested.
Yes, I think I speak for everyone listening. We are very interested.
I was born in 1982 in Guangdong, China, which is like a southern province of China. And at the time, I was born during the one-child law. There was a period, I think it was late 70s, up until actually recently, 2016, China wanted to control their population. And everybody was only allowed to have one kid. And it caused all sorts of problems. And I was the second child in my family. And I'm a girl. My sister was born in 80 and I was born in 82. And my family actually had to pay a fine for me. And I actually did not even know that until I was 18. And my grandmother told me that. So that was a bit of a shock. But we came here when I was 8 months old. And by then, my parents had already put in the paperwork to come to America, which is about a 3-year waiting period, I think, back then. So my sister was born 2 years before me, and then I was born, and then we came here. And then a few months later, my mother found out she was pregnant with my sister, my little sister. So if we had stayed there, we would have probably had some issues there.
Thankfully, her family made it to America just in time to have their third child and eventually settled near New York City. But that move wasn't easy. I get stressed if I'd had to move across state lines. Imagine having to move your entire family to a whole new country across the ocean where you don't even speak the language. I can't even imagine how that must have felt. What I do know is that they were ready to do anything they could for Gigi and her sisters.
We were first over in Sheepshead Bay, Brooklyn, actually, when I think about it. We lived there for a few years up until I was in kindergarten. My dad got a factory job in Connecticut, of all places, and we ended up moving to a house in Queens. My parents, like, obviously took out a loan because I think that they just felt like they needed to give us, like, the house, right? Even though if it cost a lot of money and they had to take out a huge loan and borrow money from our family, but we were lucky like that. But no, it was a big struggle. In a lot of ways, at any given point, stuff can just everything can be pulled out from under you. And even though I'm now in my 40s, I get that feeling pretty often, that the feeling of if I don't work hard enough, I'm going to lose everything constantly. And then if you kind of marry that with the sense of the insecurity of being an artist, it kind of is very exponentially like gets bigger for you in your head, especially for me when I was growing into this business, growing into my time as an artist.
When I was growing up, my dad worked 6 days a week, usually from 5 a.m. until 6 a.m. or 7 at night. I remember waking up at 5 a.m. to watch him put his boots on and get ready to go out the door just to make sure we had everything we needed. I saw every day how hard he worked, and I took notice. My wife saw the same in her mom, always busting her butt to make ends meet. Gigi saw this as well. All of us at some point went to work with our parents, not because we were helping them, but just so that we could spend some more time with them.
My parents were they're still so hardworking. My dad, my mom passed away when I was 27. So I'm 42 now. My mom passed away but I just remember the struggle growing up. My mom worked at a sewing factory. My dad, even though he was working and commuting back and forth to Connecticut for this factory job, he worked on the weekends doing construction work and fixing electronics. And and I worked in a sewing factory with my mother too, because we wanted to make extra money. And also for me, I couldn't, even though my parents tried their best to provide for us, like I wanted my own money. So I worked in the summers and I also really wanted to be with my mom. If my mom was working 7 days a week, I wanted to spend some of that time with her. So my sisters and I would sometimes go and like sit with her, or I would go with her and go and work. We would trim thread off of buttons and trim the thread off of all this clothing that was getting made. So when clothing is being sewn together, they do it inside out. So there's all this loose thread on the seams, on the buttons, and there were a bunch of kids there making a few extra dollars to help out because they needed extra people to do stuff like that. So people brought in their children. I was there with maybe three other kids trimming thread off of garments. That was my childhood.
While I can easily relate to their struggle of growing up in a household just trying to stay afloat, there are parts of Gigi's story and my wife's story that I will never fully understand. And that was that feeling of being stuck between two worlds or two cultures.
We have, as immigrant children, and also as people who have become Americans, because I've become an American, there's always a sense of a mixed feeling about our identity. When I was a kid, I desperately wanted to assimilate. And so I learned how to speak perfect English by watching television. I watched American television. I watched American movies. I hung out with Americans and I really wanted to become American. And honestly, I kind of wish that I had retained some of my own Asian identity. It's a lot of things. There's a lot of feelings. And even though, and I think as I've gotten older, I've become more comfortable with talking about it because when I was a kid, I didn't want to tell my friends that sometimes I helped my mom at the sewing factory. That was felt very shameful. We were poor. It felt, or rather, we were like hardworking like lower middle class, working class people in Queens, like many people are. And even though we owned a house, it didn't mean, as we know, just because we own property doesn't mean we're well off. And even then, you're still paying off a mortgage, and there are bills, and you're working my dad was working a factory job. My mother is working at a sewing factory. They have three small kids. It's a struggle, and I think that I've taken that work ethic well into my adulthood. I work all the time. I'm constantly scared that everything will be pulled out from under me. I've had 10 years of going to therapy to tell myself that it's going to be fine and I can figure it out. You don't kind of get over that struggle. But also, that's made me such a hard scrabble person. I work because I feel like in order to get out of any situation, whenever I feel scared, I kind of go like, I can rely on myself to get out of this. I can figure it out. I can try to sell my work. I can work harder. Um, which may or may not be always the best solution. Working harder, guys, is not always the best solution.
Even in New York City, a place as diverse as it is, Gigi still had to deal with racism, but she found her way through it.
The thing is, and this is like really sad, and I feel super ashamed of it, is that I did feel very ashamed, mostly probably because of school, but also because, listen, there's racism. People call you things for looking different. And even if we have a very diverse population in New York City, yeah, you get called names and you get harassed, even as a little girl. And definitely I saw it with my parents. So I think that the assimilation just was a natural, like, I didn't want to be the same, but at least I wanted to master the language. My dad would drive us to school and play Chinese opera on on his stereo system, and it was so embarrassing. But now I'm like, you know, my dad loves Chinese opera because he's Chinese. Of course, he loves Chinese opera. In fact, I can enjoy some Chinese opera now. But it's so I feel to this day super sad that I wasn't just more proud. That my parents worked really hard to come here and instill this very harsh work ethic on us. But my parents worked really hard. I can't, can you imagine? Can you imagine, Jacob, at this time in your life, right now at 26, moving to a completely foreign country that does not speak your language? Exactly. And then you have three kids. Can you imagine that?
As a kid, she wasn't exactly into Chinese opera, but she did fall in love with art.
Like every kid, I was drawing. I was drawing. I loved actually, well, I mean, really what got me into art was Disney movies. The Little Mermaid is the reason why I'm an artist, truly. I was like back in the 80s, man, The Little Mermaid. When I first saw that trailer, I was like, what is this? What is this? I watched that movie like crazy. I had coloring books. I drew and copied stills from the movie. And I just remember I still have the original drawing. I drew a painting. I drew and I used marker and I filled it in with like a drawing of Ariel and Flounder. And I put a little twinkle in her eye. And I was like, I am so good at this. I must have been 11 years old. I was like, I'm a genius. I'm clear. And I remember, I kid you not, at 11 years old, when I put that sparkle in her eye, I said, this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. The power of animation.
Gigi quickly became addicted to bringing her images to life with just a pen and paper.
I never thought to do anything else. As I said, I did that drawing and I literally, and I can remember this very much clearly. This is going to be what I do for the rest of my life. I'm a hyper focused person. After that, I drew every day. I drew every day. I don't do every day now, but like when I was a kid, I mean, truly every single day, like it was my job. I was a maniac.
And luckily, her parents helped feed her obsession.
My parents came back with paper for me. My parents were scared for me, but they were scared mostly because I was good. They were like, shit, he's actually really good at this. The thing is, look, if you have a kid who's not that good, that might have been easier for them. If I was only kind of good at that age, if I wasn't like, dude, seriously, I think for my parents, they were like, oh, dang, like, like she's actually really good. And they actually counter to what a lot of people say about hyper pushy Asian parents. My parents were actually quite supportive of me. I think that they were partially hoping I would quit, but they were also really excited that they had a child that had a passion for something that wasn't sitting around all day, right? They were really happy that I was a hyperactive kid. I was always outside jumping rope. They must have been really happy I was sitting still and doing a quiet activity because my goodness. So they got me reams of paper. They even got me temporarily a private art teacher who I didn't like very much because he was drawing on my stuff and I was 11 years old. I was like, why are you drawing over my drawing of Aladdin when I spent hours on this? How dare you?
Exactly, how dare he? You do not touch a girl's Aladdin drawing. That's just rule number one. Like Gigi said, her parents supported her, but they were scared for her too. The life of an artist doesn't exactly have a great reputation, and they came here to give their kids a better life, so of course they'd worry if she was going to have a stable career or not. But Gigi, as she was pretty headstrong, and that feeling that art was her purpose, it never went away.
My parents showed me off. They were very happy that I was doing it. And but when I was applying for high school, I got into one of the top 3 science high schools in New York City. I got into Brooklyn Tech and they were like, "You should go to Brooklyn Tech." And I said, "No." I got into the art high school, LaGuardia Music and Art, which was the FAME school. And I said, "Well, I really need you to sign the permission slip for me to go to my art school." And they were like, "But what about the science school?" I was like, "You know that I'm not going to go there."
Whether her parents put up a fight or not, I have no idea, but I do know that Gigi eventually went to the art school.
I was always a headstrong kid. I was never going to do what my parents said. Was like that when I was a kid, was like that as an adult. And so they decided, they're like, "Well, good luck." And my high school was very academics heavy. I was a straight A student. I already had a massive portfolio to get into my high school. So I was always ready. I was ready to go. I was ready to go since I was like 11 years old. I was like, "Here we go. We're going to art school." Like, clearly, this is my trajectory. I did not expect to become a painter, though, but it happened. So that was one of those things where my parents thought, well, at least she's going to school for commercial art. She's going to school for animation. And when I left school and I said, "Well, I don't want to do that," my mom was livid. She was like, "What are you talking about?" I was like, "I want to be a painter." She was like, but you just got this like amazing degree." And I'm like, "I'm not interested in it."
The number of people I know who went to college, got a degree, and never actually used it is way higher than it should be. But sometimes what you thought at 18 would be your life turns out to not exactly be your dream. Gigi loved art, but making animation just wasn't how she wanted to spend every day of her life. So I'm gonna go ahead and let Gigi tell you on how she fell in love with painting.
Becoming a painter is a whole story, actually. I had always wanted to be a painter. In fact, I always looked up to the Renaissance painters. I desperately wanted to be Da Vinci when I was a kid, but my high school didn't really support that. They weren't. They gave oil painting classes, and I took so much art when I was in my high school because it was an art school. But nobody really taught me how to do oil painting. When I was a freshman at School of Visual Arts, there was a woman that took over my first year drawing class. Her name is Kathleen Gilia, and she was looking for an assistant for her studio. She happened to meet me. I was in her class. She was making us do really difficult drawings, like copying Renaissance drawings in class. And it was really tough. For me, I had already spent years trying to copy Da Vinci drawings. So I was all about it. And she came up to me one day and said, "I need an assistant. Do you want to come to my art studio?" So I was 18, freshman in college, going to her huge art studio, art loft in Soho in Manhattan. And she painted and paints just like the old masters. In fact, she worked for years being a restoration artist at the Capo di Monte in Naples, Italy. She worked and fixed and restored old master paintings so she can paint just like all of them.
This encounter would be Gigi's first real dive into painting, and when she got a taste, she was hooked, just like she was on drawing, all over again.
So I walked in there and there she had these paintings that were to scale of all of these old masters, but they were changed a little bit to make a political statement or make a personal statement about the people in the paintings or just make a statement. You could not believe it. I could not believe it. I went in there and I was like, "What are these paintings?" And she's like, "These are my paintings." And I'm like, "What do you want me to do for you?" And she's like, "Well, you can start working for me and you can help me with underpainting." And honestly, it was a dream. I had wanted to I knew in my heart always, Jacob, that I wanted to be a painter. That being an animator was really just like the safe thing. And I went in there and my very first day, she had a full-sized huge painting. It must have been about like 8, 9 feet wide. And it was of a Rembrandt painting called Danae. It was like a nude woman laying about and Zeus is raining gold on her. And she had a full size copy of it that she was working on.
Then she was put to the real test.
or rather, and that she was going to change. And she said, as she pointed to this very elaborate golden bedpost, and she said, "So I'm going to mix the paint for you, and I want you to paint it in for me. And by the way, I'm going to leave for an hour. I have to go run an errand. So you go on ahead and paint this elaborate golden bedpost while I'm gone." And I'm like 18. I'm like, holy fuck, she's gonna fire me. And I had never really worked with oil painting except for like 3 months in high school and poorly. And so there I did it. She came back and she's like, "Did you know you could do that?" I'm like, "No." And she's like, "Okay, cool." And she said to me something I'll never forget. She said, "Once you know what really good painting is, you will tell the difference between really good painting and crap painting." To this day, I still work for her. I'm now only with her twice a week, but I love the job. I've been there now for over 20 years. I used to be her full-time assistant in my early to mid 20s. I'm not there full time anymore. I've also worked for other painters in between and started working with mural artists. But and there have been times where I didn't see her, spend time with Kathy, but I am still with her now twice a week to this day. It's been over 20 years.
She was so involved helping other artists as their assistants that she bounced from one studio to the next, painting all day long.
I used to go to my one of the jobs at 8:30, leave at 3, go to the other job at 3:30, work until 10, and then come home and work until 2 for myself. And twice, the 3 of us had shows, and I would be working all of the time. I don't ever do that anymore. I don't work full time for anybody. I haven't worked for full time for anybody since I was 27. It's been a very long time. So I learned a lot. But you know what? 10,000 hour rule, right? I work for her full time between her and these other artists I work for, helping them with their work. I work with another artist doing large scale color pencil work. You can't pay for that kind of education. You just can't. You can't pay for it. No teacher will allow you those kind of hours. No school will. You can pay $50,000, $60,000, but you will never get an education the way I got an education how to paint. I didn't learn how to paint the convention. I learned how to paint in the most conventional way possible, like as an apprentice.
It was there that she saw something powerful. Amazing, independent female painters making it, doing things on their own. While she had gotten a lot out of animation school, and some of it still informs her work today, the process just wasn't for her. She wanted to paint more than anything. She wanted to be that kind of independent artist. Now, working on people's art was valuable. It taught her a lot, but it also had an effect on her own body of work, and it made it harder to find her style.
But because of that, it took me a long time to find my own voice as a painter. My very early work was very cartoony. It had figures, but it also had a lot of cartoons, and I was designing a lot of characters for my work. And then now, really, truly, I feel like I'm actually a painter. I feel I had to get away from oil paint to find my voice because, to be really honest, I don't have a great kinship to oil paint. I work with oil paint with Kathy in her studio, and I love it. I was there yesterday. I'm going to be there tomorrow. Like, I love it. I love doing underpainting for her. But the thing is, when you're doing underpainting, you're doing underpainting. You're not fully realizing a painting. So for me, even though there have been times where I've like finished little parts for her, she's really the artist. She is not, it is not that kind of relationship where I'm making her work for her. I'm not. Like, I'm doing the underpainting. I'm doing all the crap work that she doesn't feel like doing.
Oil painting and acrylic painting are very different, and Gigi wasn't feeling very connected to the oils, so she decided to teach herself acrylic.
I went through a really hard time because I got super tired of painting robots and rabbits and crazy cartoons. I got sick of it. I felt like it was no longer me. I was all out of school already for almost 10 years, and I no longer felt a kinship to animation that way. So I had to go through a change. And in order to do that, I decided to ask myself, what do I care about? And I was like, I care about animals. Let's do some photography. Let's like figure out animals. Let's start really asking myself what I want to do. And I was like, how can I make new work? So basically, I had to teach myself a new language. I had to teach myself how to paint all over again. I picked up a bunch of acrylics and I just taught myself. And it was great.
Even while switching styles and working for other artists, she was still creating her own work and even finding some early success. She was getting into shows, she was selling pieces. One of the things that really jump started her career was this wild reality show I had never heard of until now.
Also, I'm going to tell you something really funny that happened to me at 23. Okay. I auditioned for a reality show with Deitch Projects, which is a gallery in New York City. And I got into the reality show. I got cast at 23 and I got to show at 24 with one of the biggest art dealers in the world. It's called Art Star. Try not to look it up. There's not a lot of clips on YouTube, but it was the first reality art show. It wasn't seen by a lot of people, but we got so much press and it kind of got some of the galleries to be like, "Hey, who is this person?"
The show itself wasn't hugely successful, but it gave her a real in with galleries, and that was just the first stepping stone in many leading to more success.
Before the internet was the hot thing, I would walk into galleries and talk to people and I'd be like, "I was on ArtStar." And people would be like, "Let's look at your portfolio." But I was also 24. Did I even have a portfolio at 24? No. My God, no, I probably only had like 8 paintings to my name. So I wasn't getting shows at 23 really. Like I got some shows. After Deitch Projects, the group show, I was in the Queen's Museum for their biennial. But like I had a really hard time finding a gallery after that. Because listen, just because you're young and just because you're feeling really motivated and really excited, and just because I was on a reality show didn't mean that people gave a shit. I always knew I was just going to have to work really hard. And that's how I knew it was going to be fine, even if it wasn't fine all the time. And truly, sometimes at this time in my life, it's not always fine. More than anything, I knew that it was possible to do it because I've seen other people do it.
She wasn't about to lose hope. This was her whole life dream we're talking about. So, of course, she kept on trucking until she hit a brick wall. She started to lose her drive. She didn't even feel like herself anymore.
Like, let's take a minute to talk about mental health. Like, I was really depressed. I had no idea what was happening. And it wasn't just obviously because of a relationship. Things trigger things. One thing can cause a domino effect and affect everything. I didn't want to paint. I was really sad. I didn't know even what to do because up until that point, I could solve all of my own problems. I always thought, even when my mom was passing away, even when my mom was sick, I knew that it was like a time that I can get through. But when you're depressed, when you're crushingly depressed, it's inside of you and you can't get it out. It just feels like it's something that lives in you. And I was really scared. I was super, super scared. But I kept thinking I could talk myself out of it. And I couldn't.
I know exactly how she feels. I mentioned in another episode how just a few years ago I went through a really dark depression. So bad that I honestly don't even remember what I was doing most of the days. It was really like I was living in some sort of limbo. This podcast, this project, in a lot of ways saved me. And Gigi, well, she would find what would save her.
So my whole early 30s for like 2 years, I was like, I think something is wrong with me. I don't know what it is. I was scared every single day and I didn't want to paint, even though I still had to paint. I was forced to paint because it was my job. I wasn't making my own work. I was really sad. I was very, no, I was depressed. Like it's more than being sad. I was really, really crushingly depressed. And you know what? Being an artist doesn't help. Certainly. Like, to your question, it's like, no, like you already feel like you're alone sometimes as your own island alone in the world being an artist when things are not going well. And like as I said, in my early 30s, my 20s, early 30s, I like didn't sell anything. I wasn't really selling. So it wasn't like, but I was showing all the time.
That's right. I mean, appearing successful and actually being successful, they're two very different things. And that also depends on how you view success in the first place. I could go on a whole rant about artists pretending to be, I guess, more successful, bigger than they really are. Hell, my entire second exhibition was basically on this whole topic. But here's the thing, when you're an artist, especially a young one who's still growing, you don't have studio assistants, you don't have all the resources you wish you had, and you spend a lot of time alone. Mix that with depression and everything else, it all gets amplified.
The level of support that I got, even though I wasn't selling, it's amazing. I can't believe these galleries kept showing me even though I wasn't selling because they really believed in me, right? And but at the same time, like I was going through this whole mess inside of myself. I felt unsure and because of the way I was feeling about myself, I was unsure about my work. I didn't want to paint and I started therapy. I started going to see a therapist after waiting and waiting 2 years, like, where I felt like every day I would wake up in the morning and stare at the ceiling and go like, "Why am I getting up today? Why am I bothering?" And it's also tough because, my exterior is cheerful Care Bear. So it's it was really hard. I would be smiling, going to shows, and people would be like, "You look fine." I was like, "No, I feel horrible every single day and I don't want to get up."
I know for me, most of my best ideas seemingly come out of nowhere. Maybe I'm on a hike or I'm cutting the grass and boom, something hits me and I have to stop everything and just write it down before it disappears. For Gigi, therapy started out as a way to understand why she was feeling depressed, but it turned into something more. A breakthrough happened and an idea that would eventually inspire the signature style of painting she is known for today.
I remember going to therapy and going like, "I wanna quit art. This is a stupid business. Why am I doing here?" And she's like, "Okay, but really, what's the problem?" And I was like, "I hate myself. I don't know what's up." And she's like, "Let's talk about that. Let's, like, figure this out." And we had to work through things, and I think about 6 months into my time with her, I started drawing again. I started, finding the story of this bird that lives in Australia called the bowerbird. And the bowerbird is this magical bird that the male bird, in order to catch a mate, has to collect all of these objects and create this formation with these objects, and also gather sticks and create a formation called a bower. He stands there, and when a female bird comes, he does a little song and a little dance for her. And if she likes the song and dance, she checks out. Well, she checks out the stuff first, and then he does the song and dance. And if that works out, they mate. And you know what? Bird is beautiful, a bowerbird. And I was like, well, that sounds like a great story. I love this story of this bird. I'm like, well, I'm not doing anything else. So I started going out and collecting objects. I started gathering sticks and I started creating bowers in my apartment. And I started doing photography with it. And then I started doing drawings. And I started adding the bird to my drawings. And that was how I started painting birds and drawing birds. And that got me, that saying, a body in motion stays in motion. That's how I felt. Once I started the ball rolling, I was rolling again.
As she began to heal, she also began to rediscover her way and her reason for getting up in the morning.
But it really had a lot to do with, like, I had so much doubt and fear. And I did that photography. I made those bowers for weeks before I made any drawings from them. I just did them and I did them. I did photographs. And then I was like, this could be a project. I think I should actually tell the story of this bird, but like relay it back to us as artists. Because we spend so much time making things, hoping for somebody to like us, which is really the story of this bird, but it's also the story of us. And I made these paintings. I made the bowerbird paintings for 7 years. I did talks about them. Galleries started asking me to do workshops, a bowerbird workshop where people brought in objects and make bowers together. It was really great.
And here's the beautiful part. After years of painting these birds, last year Gigi finally got to go see one in real life.
And last June, I did go to Australia and I finally saw the bowerbird. And I cried. I cried. I lived on a farm in southern Australia from this other birder that invited me to visit, and I got to see the bird, and it was so full circle. I cried. There was a bower. I was living in a tent on this farm, and he was like, "You can just walk to the." I walked to the bower every single day, and I looked at it, said good morning to it, saw the bowerbird, saw the male and the female every day. Like, nature saved my life. Therapy and nature saved my life. Truly.
Her parents came here so that they could give their children the American dream. Like I said at the beginning of this episode, everyone's vision of that dream is different. For Gigi, it was about having the freedom to spend her days in front of a canvas. But as people, we're multidimensional, and Gigi eventually realized she needed to look outside of herself to find new inspiration. She found it in nature and in birds. Now, outside of painting, Gigi is involved in volunteer work for the New York City Bird Alliance, which is part of this thing called Project Safe Flight. During the spring and fall migrations, millions of birds going through New York City tend to fly right into windows on account of all the skyscrapers. Gigi is what you call a collision monitor. She gets up early and visits buildings, checking around for any birds that might have had an accident. This way, the New York City Bird Alliance can track which buildings have the most collisions and use this data to help affect policy changes to make these buildings safer for wildlife. She has also taken her love of photography and birding to a whole new level, tracking migrations and seeking out every species she can. Her life has changed, her work has changed, and so did her dream and what drives her.
Because to care about something that's outside of yourself, just like you care about your community, right? Like it's not just your podcast. Care about something outside of yourself that you can participate in is very important to me. So, as I've gotten older, the art world means less to me. It still means something to me. We still always as humans want human connection and we want people to care about what we do. But but getting older, caring about something outside of myself gives me a bigger reason to get up in the morning because like it's not just about me.
Thank you so much for listening to yet another episode of the podcast. I appreciate all of you sticking around to the end. If you enjoyed this, please head on over to patreon.com/MyArtIsReal. You can sign up, get bonus clips, Patreon only live streams, packs of stickers sent to your mailbox, a zine sent to your mailbox, all kinds of discounts and merch and everything you can think of. It's all on Patreon. Directly supports the podcast and helps me continue to tell these meaningful and powerful stories. Thank you so much for Gigi for coming on this episode. I couldn't do the show without you listeners, all the amazing artists willing to be on here. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you in the next episode.